Today we are talking about the three countries, China, the US, and Russia, of how CO2 emissions have impacted the forest and as well on our life. We are passing through 26 years in total as we can see the tremendous changes through them. As you could see, China, US, and Russia are very big countries in the world. Calculating and researching more about it could be useful. Also, as on Gapminder, we could really talk about the countries as there are massive changes to them. In 1990, we could see all three countries have a different starting point according to how big the country is and how it has been managed. Russia, as it is the biggest country, has about 8.09 million square kilometers, being all forests, having 2.53 million tons of CO2 emitted as well. Whereas China is starting at a low end with only 1.57 million square kilometers of forests and having 2.42 million tons emitted. Thirdly, the US being the most CO2 emitted in 1990, having a total of 5.13 million tons and has 3.02 million square kilometers of forests. Fast forwarding 10 years, as we could see the increments in CO2 from China at a common rate, whereas the US is increasing slowly. The decrease of CO2 in Russia is still having the same forest area. Into details about China, with lifestyle changes and rapid economic growth in China, the CO2 emissions in China have increased rapidly. The CO2 emissions from fossil fuel combustion energy related emissions and cement production process related emissions in China rose steadily and slowly in the pre-WTO era from 1980 to 2002. These emissions increased from 1,467 to 3,694 million tons during this period, a rate of 8% per year. In the US, carbon dioxide emissions in the 2000s were nearly 14% higher than in 1990. The Department of Energy Information Administration said global warming pact that President Bush rejected this year's comments industrialized countries to roll back greenhouse gas emissions to 1990 levels. From 1999 to 2001, you can see the graph, China's CO2 emissions are increasing fairly slow. Also, life expectancy increases from 68.7 in 1990 to 72.6 in 10 years. By far, the US is continuing 77.9 in life expectancy, as it has not emitted a lot in 10 years, still staying at a constant rate. Interesting fact, as Russia is decreasing its CO2 emissions at life expectancy is still decreasing there. Passing all the way to recent years of 2016, you could see the growth China has made in the past 20ish years as it is zooming and rocketing past the US, which usually produces the most. As having 9.83 million tons emitted, almost 10, the whole life expectancy and forest area have not changed that much as well. The US being decreasing the amount of produced and emitted, having the same exact life expectancy as well. Lastly, Russia has been developing slowly as using the emitting a low amount of CO2, keeping their life expectancy developing at also rate. From this graph, my main focus was on China as the amount of CO2 emissions are being produced every year and staying at this rate of being the most CO2 emitted country every year. As the US is consuming and using greenhouse energy that are clean, the amount of CO2 produced every year has been decreasing, such as Russia, as the amount of area where people cannot live as it is too cold, the amount of forest area will also be bigger than the amount of CO2 produced, most likely.